you've ever stopped at a gas station late at night, you've probably noticed how different they feel after midnight. During the day, they're loud, busy, safe. But around 2 or 3 in the morning, they feel completely different. The lights are still on, the doors are still open, but something about the place feels off, like you're not supposed to be there. Tonight, I'm going to share 3 true gas station horror stories. Stories from people who were working or passing through places just like that. Stories where something didn't feel right at first, and then got a lot worse. Because sometimes the scariest part isn't what you see, it's realizing you're not alone. If you enjoy realistic horror stories like this, subscribe for more every week. Let's get into it. Story 1. The Hitchhiker Who Didn't Leave. I've worked overnight routes long enough to know the difference between a normal stop and a stop that feels wrong. Most gas stations after midnight feel quiet but predictable. You still hear things: cars pulling in, the hum of the refrigerators, a door opening and closing. There's movement, there's life. Wrong quiet is different. Wrong quiet is when the place feels like it's still running, but nothing is actually happening. That night, I pulled into a small gas station off Interstate 80. Same place I'd used dozens of times before. 2 pumps working, 1 cashier inside, fluorescent lights strong enough to wash the color out of everything. From a distance, it looked normal, but when I parked, something felt off immediately. There were only 2 vehicles, a semi-truck parked along the far edge of the lot, and an older sedan near the entrance. No one at the pumps, no one walking in or out. I sat in the van for a second longer than usual before getting out. Not because I was scared, just noticing. The kind of noticing you do when something doesn't match what you expect. The air felt still, not cold, not windy, just still. I stepped out, closed the door, and the sound carried farther than it should have, like the space was empty enough to echo. Inside the store, everything looked normal again. Shelves stocked, coffee machine running, the cashier standing behind the counter watching something on a small screen. He didn't look up when I walked in. That wasn't unusual. Night shift workers don't ask questions. They just exist. I grabbed a coffee and a bottle of water and paid without saying much. The whole interaction took maybe 30 seconds, but even inside, something felt delayed, like everything was half a step behind. When I pushed the door open and stepped back outside, that's when I saw him. He was standing just beyond the reach of the main lights, not in complete darkness, but not fully visible either. A few steps past where the brightness ended. At first, I thought he was walking toward the road. Then I realized something. He wasn't moving. He was already there, and he was facing the gas station. Not the highway, not the parking lot, the building, watching it. I stood there for a second longer than I should have, trying to place what felt wrong about it. And then it clicked. He wasn't waiting. People waiting shift their weight, check their phone, look around. He didn't do any of that. He just stood there, still, like he had been standing there for a while. And for some reason, that felt more uncomfortable than if he had been moving.
I told myself not to overthink it. Gas stations get all kinds of people at night. Travelers, truck drivers, people passing through. Standing still isn't a crime, but something about the way he was positioned kept pulling my attention back. He wasn't angled toward the road like someone trying to catch a ride. He was angled toward the building, toward the light, like he was watching it or waiting for something to happen inside. I walked back to the van and opened the door. The interior light came on, breaking the darkness around me for a second. When I looked back up, he had moved. Not far, but enough. He was closer to the edge of the road now, still not fully in the light, still not fully hidden, just repositioned, like he had been waiting for me to notice him. I got in, shut the door, and sat there for a second with the engine off, watching. He didn't raise his hand, didn't signal, didn't do anything that would make it obvious he needed a ride. He just stood there. Then, after a few seconds, he lifted his thumb, slowly. Not the quick motion people usually do, not the kind that says, "Hey, can you help me out?" This was slower, deliberate, like he had already decided I was going to stop. I don't normally pick people up, especially not on empty highways, especially not at night. But there are moments where you make a decision before you fully process it. This was one of those. I started the engine, pulled forward, and stopped a few feet ahead of him. He didn't rush, didn't jog to the door. He walked, calm, even steps. When he reached the passenger side, he leaned slightly and looked in. "You heading east?" he asked. His voice was quiet, flat, not tired, not nervous, just empty. "Yeah," I said. "Scranton." He nodded once. "That works." I hesitated for a second longer than I should have. I've worked overnight routes long enough to know the difference between a normal stop and a stop that feels wrong. Most gas stations after midnight feel quiet but predictable. You still hear things, cars pulling in, the hum of the refrigerators, a door opening and closing. There's movement, there's life. Wrong quiet is different. Wrong quiet is when the place feels like it's still running, but nothing is actually happening. That night, I pulled into a small gas station off Interstate 80. Same place I'd used dozens of times before. 2 pumps working, 1 cashier inside, fluorescent lights strong enough to wash the color out of everything. From a distance, it looked normal, but when I parked, something felt off immediately. There were only 2 vehicles, a semi-truck parked along the far edge of the lot, and an older sedan near the entrance. No one at the pumps, no one walking in or out. I sat in the van for a second longer than usual before getting out. Not because I was scared, just noticing. The kind of noticing you do when something doesn't match what you expect. The air felt still, not cold, not windy, just still. I stepped out, closed the door, and the sound carried farther than it should have, like the space was empty enough to echo. Inside the store, everything looked normal again. Shelves stocked, coffee machine running, the cashier standing behind the counter watching something on a small screen. He didn't look up when I walked in. That wasn't unusual. Night shift workers don't ask questions.
They just exist. I grabbed a coffee and a bottle of water and paid without saying much. The whole interaction took maybe 30 seconds, but even inside, something felt delayed, like everything was half a step behind. When I pushed the door open and stepped back outside, that's when I saw him. He was standing just beyond the reach of the main lights, not in complete darkness, but not fully visible either. A few steps past where the brightness ended. At first, I thought he was walking toward the road. Then I realized something. He wasn't moving. He was already there, and he was facing the gas station. Not the highway, not the parking lot, the building, watching it. I stood there for a second longer than I should have, trying to place what felt wrong about it. And then it clicked. He wasn't waiting. People waiting shift their weight, check their phone, look around. He didn't do any of that. He just stood there, still, like he had been standing there for a while. And for some reason, that felt more uncomfortable than if he had been moving. I didn't respond right away. There were a few diners along that stretch of I-80, but none of them stay open that late. Not the smaller ones, not the ones off the quieter exits. Still, I nodded and kept driving. The highway ahead was empty. No headlights in front of us, nothing behind us except darkness. After a few minutes, an exit sign appeared in the distance. He leaned forward slightly. That one. I slowed and took the ramp. The moment we left the highway, everything got darker. No streetlights, no other cars, just the van headlights cutting through a narrow road surrounded by trees, the kind of road that feels shorter than it actually is. We drove for maybe a minute before the building came into view. At first, it looked like a normal roadside diner, low structure, wide windows, old sign out front. But as we got closer, something didn't match. There were no lights inside. None. Not even the faint glow you get from a place that's closed but still has power. Just darkness. The sign above the entrance flickered weakly. East Valley Diner. Only half the letters were working. The parking lot was empty. No cars, no movement. I slowed the van and pulled in anyway. The headlights washed over the front of the building. The windows reflected the light back at me like black mirrors. "You sure this is open?" I asked. He didn't answer immediately. He looked at the building, then said quietly, "It used to be." I frowned. "What do you mean?" But he was already reaching for the door. It opened. Cold air moved into the van. He stepped out, closed it behind him, and started walking toward the entrance. Slow, same pace as before. No hesitation, no change in posture. I stayed where I was, watching through the windshield. He reached the door, stopped, and just stood there, not trying the handle, not knocking, just standing, facing it. For a few seconds, I thought maybe he was waiting for someone inside, but there were no lights, no sound, nothing that suggested anyone was there. Then something shifted, not in the environment, in him. He turned, slowly, not startled, not reacting, just turning, and looked directly at the van, at me. Even from that distance, I could tell his expression hadn't changed. No signal, no wave, no acknowledgement, just watching. And for the first time since he got into the van, I felt something I couldn't explain. Not fear, not yet,
just a clear, uncomfortable thought. He wasn't waiting for the diner. He was waiting for me to leave. I didn't think about it longer than that. I put the van in drive, turned around, and headed back toward the road. As I pulled out of the parking lot, I checked the mirror. He was still there. Same spot, same posture, facing the van, watching it disappear. And even after the trees blocked the diner from view, that feeling didn't go away. It stayed. Like something about that stop wasn't finished yet. Like I had left something behind that wasn't supposed to stay there. I stayed on the highway for a while after that. Long enough for the road to feel normal again. A few trucks passed. Headlights appeared and disappeared. The kind of movement that reminds you you're not completely alone. But the feeling from the diner didn't fade the way it usually does after something strange. It stayed in the back of my mind. Not loud, not urgent, just present. I kept replaying the same detail, the way he stood there, not trying to get inside, not looking around, just waiting, and more than that, watching. About 2 hours later, I stopped again. Different gas station, bigger, brighter, more people. The kind of place that feels normal no matter what time it is. I parked, shut off the engine, and sat there for a second. Nothing felt wrong. No silence, no stillness, just a regular stop. I grabbed my coffee cup and went inside. The store was active, a couple of people near the counter, a guy restocking shelves, the cashier talking to someone. Everything felt the way it should. I walked toward the back hallway to use the restroom. That's when I saw it. At first, it didn't register, just another paper taped to the wall. But something about the photo made me slow down. I turned back, looked again, and felt my chest tighten. It was a missing person poster. The paper was slightly faded, edges curled, like it had been there for a while. Across the top, missing, and below it, a face. I stopped moving because I recognized it immediately. It was him, the man I had just dropped off. Same face, same eyes, same expression. Not similar, not close, exact. I stepped closer, read the name, David Holland. Underneath that, missing since October 2015. I stared at the date longer than I should have, trying to process it, because it didn't make sense. He didn't look older, didn't look different. He looked exactly like the photo, like no time had passed at all. Below that, last seen near Interstate 80, Clearfield County. The same place I picked him up, the same place I dropped him off. Hey, I turned. One of the employees was standing at the end of the hallway. You good? Yeah, I said quickly. Then I pointed at the poster. This guy, you know anything about it? He glanced at it. Oh, that one's been up forever. How long? He shrugged. Years, I think. My grip tightened slightly on the coffee cup. What happened to him? They found his car abandoned off the highway, he said. No sign of him after that. I swallowed. They never found him? He shook his head. No. Then added, people said they saw him walking out there that night. Walking. That word hit harder than anything else, because that's exactly how I had seen him, standing,
moving, waiting. I hesitated, then asked one more thing. "There's a diner near there, right? East Valley?" He frowned slightly. "That old place?" "Yeah. That's been closed for years." "How many? 7? Maybe 8? I didn't respond, because that was the point where everything stopped fitting together. The man I picked up had asked me to take him somewhere that hadn't been open since before he disappeared. And that's when I realized something else, something I hadn't noticed before, something small but wrong. When he got out of the van, he didn't look at the diner first. He looked at me, like the destination was never the place. I didn't go back to the highway right away. I stood there in that hallway for a few seconds longer than I should have, staring at that poster like it was going to change if I looked at it long enough. It didn't. Same face, same eyes, same expression. I walked back out to the van slowly, the noise of the store fading behind me as the door closed. The parking lot felt normal. People moving, cars pulling in, engines running, everything the way it should be. But it didn't feel right anymore, because now I knew something I couldn't ignore. That diner wasn't open, hadn't been for years, and the man I dropped off there shouldn't have been there at all. I sat in the driver's seat for a minute, hands resting on the wheel, not starting the engine. I kept thinking the same thing. What if he's still there? Not inside the diner, not waiting for it to open, just there, standing in that same spot, watching. The exit was about 20 minutes back. I told myself I didn't need to check, that it didn't matter, that I already had my answer. But that's not how it works when something doesn't make sense. You don't move on, you go back. The drive felt longer this time, the highway emptier, the forest darker, like the road had stretched out while I wasn't paying attention. When the exit finally appeared, I slowed down without thinking, took it. Same turn, same road, same darkness. The diner came into view exactly where I left it. Nothing had changed. Same broken sign, same empty lot, same black windows. I pulled in slowly and parked in the same spot. This time, I turned off the engine. No sound, no movement, just the faint buzz of the neon sign above the door. He wasn't there. The entrance was empty. No figure, no movement, nothing. For a second, I felt relief, like I had just proven everything wrong, like the whole thing had an explanation after all. Then, I looked down, at the ground beside the van, and that feeling disappeared immediately. There were footprints, fresh, pressed into the thin layer of frost on the pavement, starting right beside the passenger side door. I stepped out slowly, closed the door behind me without taking my eyes off them. They were clear, defined, not scattered, not random. One set, even spacing, walking away from the van, but not toward the diner, toward the trees. I followed them without thinking, across the lot, past the edge of the building, toward the dark line where the forest began. Each step steady, no dragging, no hesitation,
like whoever made them knew exactly where they were going. The footprints didn't fade, didn't break, didn't turn back. They just kept going, straight into the woods. I stopped at the edge, didn't step inside, didn't shine my phone light, didn't call out, because something about the way the prints ended told me I didn't need to go any further. They didn't stop gradually. They didn't scatter. They ended. One step, then nothing. Like whoever had been walking had simply stopped existing. I stood there for a few seconds, listening, waiting, hoping to hear something, anything. But the forest was quiet, not normal quiet, wrong quiet. I went back to the van, started the engine, and didn't look back again. I finished that delivery, got home just after sunrise, tried to sleep, didn't. And ever since that night, every time I pass that stretch of Interstate 80, I slow down when I get near that exit. Not enough for anyone to notice, just enough to look. And sometimes, when the road is empty enough and the headlights don't reach as far as they should, I think I see someone standing just beyond the light, not facing the road, facing the cars.
Story 2. The customer who stayed too long. Most people think the worst part of working at a gas station overnight is the boredom. It's not. Boredom is predictable. What isn't predictable is realizing the person standing in front of you isn't following the same rules as everyone else, that they're not in a hurry, that they're not leaving, and that the cameras you trust to confirm everything aren't showing you what you think they are. This story didn't start with something obvious. It started with a customer who came in like anyone else and stayed longer than he should have.
I started working night shift at that gas station because it was supposed to be easy. Less traffic, less pressure. Just restocking shelves, running the register, and staying awake until morning. The place was just off a highway outside Reno. Not completely isolated, but far enough that after midnight, traffic dropped off hard. From 1 a.m. to about 4, you could go 10, 15 minutes without seeing anyone. That's what I liked about it. Predictable quiet. The kind where nothing really happens. My shift started at 10 p.m. By midnight, everything was already done. Floors cleaned, shelves stocked, coffee fresh. After that, it was just waiting, watching the door, checking the time, letting the hours pass. The first time I noticed him, it didn't feel important. He walked in around 2:30 a.m. No rush, no hesitation, just a normal pace. Mid-30s maybe. Dark jacket, jeans. Nothing about him stood out. That was the thing. If anything, he looked like someone trying not to stand out. He didn't rob anything right away, just walked slowly through the aisles. Not browsing, not comparing items, just moving, like he already knew what was there. I didn't think much of it. People do that sometimes, especially late at night. They walk around to stay awake, or just to avoid going back outside. After a minute or two, he grabbed a bottle of water from the cooler, set it down. I rang it up. He paid in cash, exact amount. Didn't say anything, didn't look at me. That part wasn't strange. A lot of night customers don't talk. They just want to get in and out.
But then he didn't leave. He picked up the bottle, stepped away from the counter, and stood near the window, facing the parking lot. At first, I assumed he was waiting for someone, or maybe just checking something outside. But he didn't move, didn't drink the water, didn't check his phone, didn't shift his weight, just stood there, looking out. I went back to restocking behind the counter, but I kept glancing over. 30 seconds, a minute, 2 minutes. He was still there, same position, same posture. That's when it started to feel off. Not wrong, just delayed. Like something in the scene hadn't progressed the way it should have. Most people don't linger like that. Even if they're waiting, they move, check their phone, look around, walk outside. He didn't do any of that. He just stood there, facing the parking lot, like he was watching something that wasn't moving.
I tried to ignore it at first. People linger sometimes, especially at night. You don't question it unless there's a reason, and at that point, there wasn't one. Just a guy standing by the window, not doing anything. After a few more minutes, I looked up again. He hadn't moved, not even slightly. Same position, same angle, still holding the bottle in his hand. That's when I checked the clock. 2:34 a.m. I remember the exact time because I was already counting down the hours. I went back to what I was doing, wiped down the counter, reorganized the register area. Looked up again. Still there. Another minute passed, then another. And that's when something started to feel wrong. Not because he was there, because of how long he had been there without changing anything. I leaned slightly to get a better angle on him. From where I stood, I could see his reflection in the glass. His face wasn't fully visible, just enough to see that he wasn't looking around, wasn't scanning the lot, wasn't reacting to anything. He was focused on one point, outside. I followed his line of sight, looked out into the parking lot. 2 empty pumps, 1 parked car. Nothing else. No movement, no one walking. Nothing that explained what he was watching. That's when I felt it. That small shift, the same kind you get when something isn't adding up. I checked the clock again. 2:36 a.m. 2 minutes. That didn't sound like much, but it felt longer. Long enough that something should have changed. I picked up a box from behind the counter just to give myself a reason to move closer. Not obvious, just enough to get a better look. "Hey," I said casually, "you waiting on someone?" No response. He didn't turn, didn't react, didn't even acknowledge that I spoke. For a second, I thought maybe he didn't hear me, so I stepped a little closer. Not too close, just enough. "Hey," I said again, "you good?" This time, he moved, but not the way I expected. He didn't turn around, didn't look at me. He nodded, once, slow, barely noticeable, then went completely still again. That was it. No words, no explanation, just that one small movement. And somehow, that made it worse. Because now I knew he heard me. He just chose not to respond. I stepped back behind the counter, tried to shake it off, told myself he was just weird, not dangerous, just off. But something about the silence had changed. It wasn't just quiet anymore. It felt like the store had stopped moving forward, like everything inside was paused, except for me. I checked the clock again. 2:38 a.m., 4 minutes total. It didn't make sense. It felt longer. That's when I glanced up at the security monitor. And that's when everything shifted. Because on the screen, he wasn't standing by the window.
At first, I thought I was looking at the wrong screen. There are 4 camera feeds on the monitor behind the counter. front entrance, parking lot, aisles, and the angle behind the register. I was looking at the aisle camera, and on that screen, he was standing near the back of the store, not by the window. I frowned and looked up, then back at the monitor, then up again. He was still there, in real life, standing by the window, same position, same posture. But on the screen, he wasn't. I leaned in closer, thinking maybe the camera was delayed, maybe it hadn't updated yet. But the rest of the feed was moving normally. The flicker from the cooler lights, the slight shift of a hanging sign, everything else matched real time, except him. On the monitor, he stood in the aisle, halfway down, facing the shelves, not moving. I looked up again. He was still at the window. That's when I felt it, that tight feeling in your chest when something stops making sense. I reached over and tapped the screen lightly, like that would fix it, like it would sync everything back together. Nothing changed. I switched the feed, front camera, parking lot, then back to aisles. Still there, same position, same angle. Then I checked the camera behind the register, and that's when my stomach dropped, because in that angle, he was closer, not in front of me, not at the counter, but not in the aisle either. He was standing halfway between. I froze. I didn't look up right away, because I already knew what I'd see. But I did anyway, slowly. He was still by the window, same spot, same stillness. 3 different camera angles, 3 different positions, none of them matching what was actually happening. I stepped back from the monitor, trying to think, trying to find something logical, a glitch, a delay, anything. That's when I noticed something else. On the aisle camera, he moved, just slightly, not a full step, not a turn. His head tilted, like he was reacting to something. I looked up instantly. He hadn't moved, still facing the parking lot, still holding the bottle, still completely still. I looked back at the monitor, and for a split second, it felt like he was looking directly at the camera, not at the shelves, not at the aisle, at me. I stepped away from the counter, not fast, not obvious, just enough to put distance between me and the screen, because at that point, it didn't feel like a camera glitch anymore. It felt like the cameras were showing me something that wasn't supposed to be visible yet. I didn't say anything after that. Didn't call out to him again. Didn't try to fix the monitor. Because whatever was happening didn't feel like something I could fix. I stayed behind the counter, close enough to see him, far enough that I didn't feel like I was standing right next to something I didn't understand. I checked the clock again. 2:41 a.m. 7 minutes. That was how long he'd been inside. And in that entire time, he hadn't changed position. Not in real life. But on the cameras, he had moved 3 times. I looked back at the monitor slowly, carefully, like moving too fast might make something worse. The aisle camera still showed him near the shelves, but now he was closer to the end of the aisle. The camera behind the register showed him even closer, almost at the counter. And the front camera, the one facing the entrance, he was standing right in front of the door. I froze, because the door was in my line of sight, and it was empty. No one there, no shadow, no movement. I didn't look up again, not right away, because I knew what I'd see. He was still by the window, but the cameras were showing something else, something ahead of that moment, or behind it. I don't know which is worse. I swallowed and stepped sideways, slowly shifting my angle so I could see both him and the front door at the same time. Nothing changed. Window, still. Door, empty. Monitor, occupied. That's when something clicked. He wasn't staying too long. He was out of sync. Like he wasn't moving through time the same way everything else was, and the cameras were picking up different points. I didn't want to test that theory. I didn't want to confirm it, but something in me needed to know. I reached for the intercom button behind the counter, the one that connects to the outside speaker. I pressed it. "Hey," I said, "store's closing in a few minutes." My voice echoed slightly through the system, louder than I expected. For the first time, he reacted. Not immediately, not fully, but his head turned, slow, controlled, and he looked toward me. Not at the counter, not at where the sound came from, at me. Even from across the store, I could tell something was wrong. His expression hadn't changed, still blank, still empty, but his eyes, they felt delayed, like whatever he was seeing wasn't happening at the same time I was seeing it. And then he did something that made everything worse. He took a step forward, in real life, just one, but on the monitor, he was already at the door. The moment he stepped forward, everything felt wrong. Not just off, not just uncomfortable, wrong. Because what I saw in front of me and what I saw on the monitor were no longer just different. They were out of order. In real life, he had only taken one step, still near the window, still several feet away from the door. But on the monitor, he was already there, standing at the entrance, hand near the handle. I didn't move, didn't speak, didn't even breathe properly. I just watched. In real life, he took another step. On the monitor, the door opened. A soft chime echoed from the entrance. I flinched, looked up instantly. The door hadn't moved, still closed, still locked in place. I looked back at the screen. The camera showed him stepping outside, walking into the parking lot, leaving. But he was still inside, still walking, still closing the distance. I backed up slowly until I felt the wall behind me. I didn't understand what I was watching anymore. Was the camera ahead of him, behind him, or showing something else entirely? He took one more step, and then he stopped. Not because he reached the door, not because something blocked him. He just stopped, mid-step, and stayed there. For a few seconds, nothing changed. Then something happened that I still can't explain. The lights flickered just once, not a full blackout, just a quick drop. And in that fraction of a second, he was gone. Not at the door, not at the window, not anywhere in the store. Gone. I stood there, frozen, staring at the spot where he had been, waiting for him to reappear, to move, to make any sound. Nothing. I walked around the counter slowly, checked the aisles, the restroom, the storage room. No one. The front door was still closed, locked from the inside. No sign it had been opened. I went back to the monitor, hands shaking slightly now. Rewound the footage. Watched it again. On the screen, everything looked normal. He walked to the door, opened it, left. Nothing strange. No delay, no glitch. Just a customer walking out. I rewound it again, slowed it down. Same result. No version of the footage showed him standing still. No version showed him inside longer than a few seconds. No version showed what I saw. I checked the timestamp, 2:35 a.m., but I knew that wasn't right, because I had watched him stand there for at least 7 minutes, and according to the system,
He was only inside for less than 10 seconds. I didn't finish that shift. I called my manager, said I wasn't feeling well, left early. They checked the footage the next day, told me everything looked normal, no issues, no glitches, no missing time. But there's one detail they couldn't explain. The door log. Every time the door opens, it records it. That night, it never registered an exit. No one left the store, not at 2:35, not at any time after. Which means, according to the system, he's still inside. And sometimes, when I think about that night long enough, I don't remember him leaving. I remember him getting closer, step by step, until the moment everything went dark. And now the part that bothers me the most isn't the cameras, it's not the missing time, it's not even the fact that he disappeared. It's the thought that keeps coming back, that the version of him I saw on the monitor wasn't showing where he had been, it was showing where he was going, and for a brief moment he was already standing at that door, waiting for it to open.
Story 3. The camera saw someone I didn't.
Most people trust security cameras. They assume cameras show exactly what's there, nothing more, nothing less. But that's not always true. Sometimes cameras don't miss things. Sometimes they show things early, before you hear them, before you notice them, before they're supposed to be there. This didn't start with something obvious. It started with a sound, something small, something easy to ignore, until I checked the monitor and saw someone inside the store while I was standing there alone. I worked alone most nights. That was part of the job. Small gas station off a rural highway in Oregon. Not completely isolated, but far enough that after midnight, traffic dropped off to almost nothing. From about 1 a.m. to 4, it was just me. I didn't mind it. You get used to the quiet, the routine, the repetition. Doors open, customer walks in, you ring them up, they leave. Most nights, nothing unusual happened, just long stretches of silence between customers. That night felt normal at first. A couple of cars came through around midnight. By 1:30, everything had settled. The parking lot was empty, the road outside was quiet. I was behind the counter, restocking cigarettes, when I heard something. A small sound. Not loud, not sudden, just something shifting. At first, I thought it came from outside. Maybe wind, maybe something hitting the side of the building. I didn't react right away. Sounds happen, especially at night. You don't check every little noise. But then I heard it again, this time clearer. Something moving, inside the store. I stopped what I was doing, stood still, listened. Nothing. The silence came back, complete. I waited a few seconds, then stepped out from behind the counter, walked slowly toward the aisle. Everything looked normal. Shelves stocked, nothing out of place, no one there. I stood there for a moment longer, trying to decide if I had imagined it. Then I went back behind the counter. That's when I noticed the monitor. The security screen sits slightly to the right. 4 camera feeds. Same setup as most places. I hadn't checked it yet that night. No reason to. But something made me look. And when I did, I felt that same shift. The same one you get when something doesn't line up. Because on the screen,
There was someone in the store.
At first, I thought I was misreading the screen. It happens sometimes. The camera angles aren't perfect. Shadows fall in weird ways. Reflections can look like movement. So I leaned closer, focused on the feed. It was the aisle camera, the one facing the back half of the store. And there was definitely someone there, standing halfway down the aisle, between the shelves, not moving, just there. I straightened up slowly and looked in that direction. Nothing. Empty aisle. Exactly how I left it. I looked back at the monitor. Still there. Same position. Same stillness. That's when I felt it. That quiet drop in your stomach when something doesn't match reality. I stepped out from behind the counter again. Not fast, not rushed, just careful. Walked toward the aisle. Each step felt louder than it should have, like the store was amplifying everything. I reached the corner, turned into the aisle. Empty. No one. No movement. I stood there for a few seconds longer than necessary, looking down the shelves, checking the floor, listening. Nothing. Then I slowly stepped back, returned to the counter, and looked at the monitor again. He was still there. Same place, same posture. It didn't flicker, didn't glitch, didn't disappear. It stayed. I stared at it longer this time, trying to catch something, a shift, a delay, anything that would explain it. That's when it moved. Not a full step, not walking. Its head turned, slowly, from facing the shelves to facing the camera. I felt my chest tighten, because I knew exactly where that camera was mounted. High corner, facing down. If someone looked at it, they weren't looking straight ahead. They were looking up. I looked up instinctively at the actual camera, mounted above the aisle. Still, unmoving. Then I looked back at the monitor, and for a second, it felt like it was looking directly at me. Not through the aisle, not through the space. At me, behind the counter, watching the screen. I stepped back, just one step, because that was the moment something changed. Before, it felt like a glitch. Now, it felt aware. I glanced toward the aisle again, still empty, then back to the screen. It hadn't moved again, still facing the camera, still perfectly still, like it had done what it needed to do, like it knew I had seen it.
I didn't move for a few seconds after that. I just stood there behind the counter, staring at the screen, trying to figure out what I was actually looking at. Because at that point, it didn't feel like a mistake anymore. It didn't feel like a reflection or a shadow or anything that could be explained away. It felt like the camera was showing me something real that just wasn't where it was supposed to be. I forced myself to look away, just for a second, toward the aisle, still empty. Then back to the monitor, still there, same position, same stillness. I swallowed and tried to steady my breathing, told myself to think, to slow down, to find something logical. That's when I heard it again, the sound, this time louder, a soft shift, like something brushing against a shelf. But it didn't come from the aisle, it came from behind me. I turned immediately. Nothing, just the counter, the register, the coffee machine humming quietly. No one there. I turned back to the monitor. The figure hadn't moved, still in the aisle,
still facing the camera. That's when something clicked. The sound didn't match what I was seeing. If something had moved in the aisle, I should have heard it from that direction. But I didn't. I heard it behind me, like whatever was happening on the camera wasn't where it actually was. I slowly reached for the edge of the counter, using it to steady myself. Then, carefully, I turned. Empty. Still nothing. I looked back at the monitor, and this time it wasn't where it had been. The aisle was empty. My chest tightened, because that meant one of two things. Either it had disappeared, or it had moved, and if it had moved, then it wasn't in the aisle anymore. I didn't check right away. I didn't look around the store, because something in me already knew. If I turned too quickly, if I reacted too suddenly, I might see it, not on the screen, but in the store, where it had always been. I stayed where I was, one hand on the counter, eyes fixed on the monitor, trying to decide what to do next, because at that point, the situation had changed. Before, whatever I was seeing was contained inside the screen, inside one part of the store. Now, it wasn't anywhere I could see, and that was worse. I slowly leaned forward, not moving my feet, just enough to bring the monitor fully into view. The aisle camera was empty. No movement, no shadow, nothing. I switched to the back storage camera, still empty. Then I switched to the camera behind the register, and that's when everything stopped, because on that screen there was someone standing behind the counter, right where I was. I didn't move, didn't react, didn't even breathe properly. I just stared at it. The figure wasn't facing the camera. It was turned slightly, like it was standing where I was supposed to be. But the angle was wrong, because if someone was behind the counter, I would have seen them. There was no space for anyone else to stand there. I looked down slowly at the counter in front of me. Empty. Then back at the monitor. Still there. Same position. I felt my chest tighten, because now the distance was gone. It wasn't across the store anymore. It wasn't in the aisle. It was here, in my space. I stepped back, slow, controlled. On the monitor, it didn't move, still standing there. But now I could see something I hadn't noticed before. Its head. It was tilted slightly, like it was listening, not to the store, to me. I didn't make a sound, didn't shift my feet, but something about that posture made it feel like it knew exactly where I was, even without turning. I glanced toward the aisle again, then toward the entrance. Still empty, no one in the store, but on the monitor, it was still behind the counter, still occupying a space that only I should have been in. Then something changed. Not a movement, not a step, a shift. Its head tilted the other direction, and slowly it began to turn, not toward the camera, toward where I was standing. The moment it started turning, I stopped thinking. There wasn't a decision. There wasn't a plan. There was just one clear instinct. Don't stay there. I moved. Not fast, not running, just enough to break that position. Stepped out from behind the counter, put distance between me and that exact spot.
I didn't look at the monitor again right away, because I didn't need to. If it had been turning toward me on the screen, then it already knew where I was. I moved toward the front door, each step controlled, deliberate, trying not to make noise. The store felt different now, not quiet, occupied, like there was something else inside the space, even if I couldn't see it. I reached the entrance, put my hand on the handle, and for a second I hesitated, because leaving meant something. If the cameras were showing something ahead of time, then there was a chance it might already be there, outside, waiting. I pushed the door open anyway. The cold air hit immediately. The parking lot was empty. No cars, no movement, no one standing near the pumps. Just darkness beyond the lights. I stepped outside, didn't look back, didn't stop, walked straight to my car, got in, locked the doors. Only then did I look up. Through the glass of the station, everything inside looked normal. Lights on, shelves still, no movement. From the outside, it looked like an empty store, like nothing had happened. I sat there for a few seconds, trying to slow my breathing, trying to process what I had just seen. Then I made the mistake. I looked at the reflection in the window, not inside the store, the reflection, because behind me, in the glass, there was someone standing inside, right behind the counter, in the exact position I had just left, facing the door, watching me. I turned immediately, looked straight through the glass. Nothing. Empty again. No one inside. No movement. I didn't wait. I started the car, pulled out of the lot, didn't look back again. I quit the next day. Didn't go back, didn't ask questions, didn't check the footage. But a week later, my manager called me, said there had been a problem with the system, not the cameras, the layout. Apparently, the camera behind the register had been installed wrong. The angle didn't match the actual space. It was offset, shifted slightly to the right, meaning the position I saw on the monitor wasn't exactly where I was standing. It was a few feet over, toward the entrance, right near the door. And ever since I heard that, I haven't been able to stop thinking about one detail. The thing I saw on the screen wasn't standing where I was. It was standing where I was going. And if I hadn't moved when I did, if I had stayed behind that counter just a little longer,